Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for choosing to spend your afternoon with us here at this fantastic Google King's Cross location for our latest installment of NMPi or NMPignite. It's brilliant to see so many familiar faces and new faces amongst the crowd, and we've put together a really wonderful agenda to inspire, educate and entertain this afternoon. We have a great panel of speakers who will be walking through the agendas that are to your left and right at all times this afternoon that look a little bit like this. And with change seeming to be the constant around us in so many aspects of everything that we do, it seemed inevitable that it was going to form the core part of our topic today, succeed in times of change. And we've brought together a panel of speakers, both a panel for a discussion and individual speakers that I think are going to do a great job of inspiring you and educating you and entertaining you on this very subject. We've got a packed agenda from 2 o'clock, which we're a little bit beyond now, but I'm sure we'll catch that up. And we're going to hear from a panel to start with. We've taken the bold decision of starting with a panel because Brexit was due to be happening tomorrow, and who knows what the situation may have been today. So we felt that it was the right way to set the scene and get some clarity on the current situation. So we'll start with the panel before moving through the individual speakers and discussing topics such as measurability, transformation, demystifying the mystery of in-housing, sustainability and transformation through innovation, and then taking responsibility, before ending with a really inspiring keynote, somebody I actually went to college with who successfully led a team on a trans-Pacific row 9,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean. So we've got a brilliant, brilliant panel of speakers to work through this afternoon. But first of all, if you have one of these, or a laptop or a tablet, now's the time to take it out and get connected to the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is Google Guest, and there is no password. So get yourselves connected, get logged in, because we really want to get you involved. And at this point, I also want to welcome the people who are live streaming this from various locations, from Sydney as far as LA, as well as very close to home here in London. Welcome to everybody who's live streaming via YouTube. You can also get involved with everybody in this room today through social media. It's hashtag NMPignite. If you want to tag us, it's at NMP_digital across all of the social media platforms. If you want to get involved, then we'd love you to contribute to the conversation with your questions. Then go on to Slido, and you should all have had the email this morning with a link to Slido, and that's a great place to make your comments and add your questions. And we really want you to contribute to the conversation right the way through the day. Through the break, speakers will be out and you'll be able to meet the speakers and ask them questions one-to-one, as well as afterwards for those that can still be here. And then, of course, we want your feedback on how we can do better and what we can improve on for the next one. So without further ado, because we've got a busy agenda to get through today, running a business, running a marketing campaign, leading a team can so often feel like looking at the summit of a mountain, with moving ice and cracks and crevices, pitfalls and perils all along the way. And there are climbers, professional climbers and mountain guides who have adopted a phrase, a terminology and a framework that was developed by the military in the 1980s. It's recently been adopted more so in business and in politics. And some of you will have heard this phrase and may be familiar with it now. It's called VUCA. Just a show of hands if any of you are familiar with that through news and media coverage. So a couple of people, of course the people on the right who have seen this presentation. It's called VUCA. And VUCA is a great way to try to understand and try to react to the changing environment around us. And it's used in different professions. And what it means is volatile. It means uncertain, like jumping out of a plane. It means complex, like algebra equations. and it means ambiguous, like this sign very close to here in Islington. And we'll pause on this because at times like this, at times of such VUCA, in such a VUCA environment, it is hard to know which way to go. Should we turn right or should we turn left? Which is right and which is wrong? And it's very, very difficult to know which way to go. So this concept of VUCA is all around us, and we don't have to look too far or think too deeply to see it everywhere we are, especially now with the cocktail of uncertainty over Brexit in every single news outlet that we see, or the ghost town of Britain that sees tens of thousands of shops closing every year, but makes no mention of the thousands of shops that open in a slightly different format each year. Or, of course, the perils of handling customer data and the leaks that happen. They all make it a very difficult VUCA environment for us. And there are pressures that respond to some of those things, like GDPR or CCPA, that we have to, as marketers, as business people, take care of. And that's, of course, very ambiguous, as we all know. And then there's changing consumer behaviors, rapidly changing consumer behaviors. Quick show of hands for who has one of these or its main rival now. Incredible, right? So, and probably in the last year or two, quick show of hands if you had one 3 years ago. So in 2 years, about half of the room here have got voice assistants in their home. And by the end of this year, about 25% of the UK will have voice assistants in their home. So consumer behavior is rapidly changing, and it's hard to keep up. So often it's driven by changes in technology, and the pace of change in technology is relentless. If we look at payments, for example, just over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've seen cash become chip and pin, become contactless with mobile. And now in China, thousands of 7-Eleven stores have facial recognition payment solutions. And that's coming this way. The pace of technological change is relentless. And so in this VUCA environment, there's a quote that I think really needs updating. And it's this. Some people liken it to Henry Ford, but it was Jesse Potter who was first quoted as saying, if you do what you've always done, then you'll get what you always got. But if we look at some businesses in the last 12 months that did what they always did, they actually got something very different. In finance, in retail, in travel, in services, and in other industries, there are lots of examples of businesses that did what they always did. It worked then. But now they're left behind. And it's tough. Times are changing. So that quote needs to be changed. But unlike Theresa May's day, there is hope. It was inevitable. There is hope. It isn't all doom and gloom, and it doesn't have to be. Because if we look a little bit further, we see businesses that are successful in this time of change. We see businesses like Lush, who understand that their customer cares deeply about environmental and animal welfare, environmental issues and animal welfare. And their marketing campaigns resonate those deeply. We see Primark, who are fastidious about price and availability, and they're being very successful as a result of that. We see Disney stores, who understood that their young customers buy differently to adult customers. They don't buy by product type, like lunch boxes. They buy by character types that they really love. So when they redesigned their stores, they built it around the character types, and they're thriving because of it. And we saw Domino's, who year after year after year innovate. And the most recent innovation is this one, which I think is just brilliant, brilliantly simple and effective, where they've launched 150,000 hotspots so that you can have your pizza delivered to any park or beach or bench as you so wish. Brilliant innovation that's kept them ahead of the game and rather than being left behind. So there is hope, and when we look at these businesses and others that are being successful in times of change, what we see is 5 principal behaviors that they all demonstrate to varying degrees. The first is prepare measurably. And so the rest of our agenda today will start to follow these, and Anna will come on stage after the panel and talk about preparing measurably using data wisely. The second is they transform sustainably. They don't jut this way and that way. They build into the architecture of their business so that they transform sustainably. And we'll welcome Naomi from BTTV and Leo from DQ&A to talk about transformation in their businesses and in their approach to marketing. They innovate relentlessly, like dominoes. And we'll hear from Google, from Abby at Google, and we'll hear from Andrew Henry at Joystick about innovation and how they're driving innovation forward in their respective businesses. The fourth is that they take responsibility, like Lush. And we'll hear from Rob Herdman at Napa Piri about how Napa are taking responsibility and growing their business as a result. And then finally, they adapt quickly. With all of that in place, they adapt quickly. And we'll hear a truly inspiring story of how Laura Penhall and her team adapted quickly to uncertain situations whilst crossing the Pacific Ocean for 9 months at sea. So that's going to form the rest of the day. And I hope that once we've gone through the agenda and we've covered these points, that with these principles in place, and you can take those back to your businesses, to your marketing campaigns, to leading your teams, that the corny ending slide, you will be able to make it to the summit of that mountain and leave your competition behind. So our next speaker, and we're getting right into the individual presentations now, is our very own Anna Yorish. She's Display Performance Manager at NMPi. And I know Anna is passionate about taking a measured approach to data. You can see her picture to your left and to your right. And if I click this green button, I think we'll have it up here as well. So Anna, if you'd like to come along to the stage and we'll welcome you. Oh, thank you very much. There you go. Green, all yours.
So I'm going to follow up a panel of lots of original ideas with an idea that is maybe a little less original. And I'm sure you've seen this slide all over the place. Data is the new oil. It's a phrase that's been used and abused, I think, a lot in the last few years. Without getting into the political overtones of it all, I think in marketing terms, it's become a call to just use all the data. You've got lots of data. Use it. And I think that's great in principle. I wouldn't disagree. But actually what that leads to can be paralysis when you don't know where to start, or ineffective strategies where you throw it all at it and just see what sticks. And it's worth revisiting where this phrase actually originally came from. It was coined, we think, by a guy called Clive Humby back in 2006, so it's actually not that new a phrase. And the point he was making was actually about how you use that data and make it effective. He said, data is the new oil. It's valuable, but if unrefined, it cannot really be used. It has to be changed into gas, plastic, chemicals, etc., to create a valuable entity that drives profitable activity. So must data be broken down and analysed for it to have value. And I think what strikes me most about this is actually how directly those three concepts, value, profitability, and analysis, really map across to what I would call the ideals of performance marketing. Performance marketing isn't simply the poorer cousin of brand marketing. It's an approach, maybe even a philosophy, which is built very much on those principles. Firstly, it's about assigning value to an action under whatever circumstances are relevant, sale, lead, click, and working out how much that's worth to you. It's then about driving profit. It's about bringing in that value to your business in as cost-efficient a way as possible. But also then, most importantly, it's about taking that margin and reinvesting it to really drive growth. And then it's about ongoing analysis. It's all about ongoing optimization, learning from it, improving, and being able to react to change as it comes along. And of course, you have to do all of this as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And this is something that at NMPi we do have a lot of experience of. We work with a lot of our clients on what we call a pure performance model. So we put up the media spend ourselves, we are paid only on results. And what that means is, yes, innovation is integral to how we approach our campaigns. We're always looking to try those new things. But we've also learned that we have to make that back out into true, proper performance gains. There's no point being seduced by a nice, flashy idea if it doesn't work. Or even worse, if you don't even know if it worked or not. And I think this is something that very much applies to the new frontiers of integrating data into your campaigns. And there's two kind of areas that applies. The first is in your creative and your messaging. So that's your personalization, making dynamic ads, and also the integrating of live data into your campaigns. And the second is your buying and your targeting, your bidding strategies, your audience segmentation. And when you're approaching your strategies and planning, I think there's 4 key questions that you need to ask here. Firstly, what are you trying to achieve? Why do you think the data use will actually help you achieve this? How will you measure your success? How will you know it worked? And how will you continue to optimize further once you've got the initial plan in place? So to put this kind of into practice, I want to start with an example. And those who know me will know that I love to talk about Liverpool. So around this time last year, they were coming to the end of a very successful season. Yes, their position in the top 4 wasn't quite certain yet, but it'd been record-breaking in terms of kit sales. But this meant that they had really big targets for next year, and they wanted us to come up with a way to sell even more than they had done the previous year. And given that this talk is all about data, maybe you're expecting me to talk about how we went away. We did some analysis, we looked at the opportunities, and we came up with a strategy in the back of that. But if I'm completely honest, what happened is I got excited, and I came up with 2 cool ideas. And I think it's important actually to be honest about this, because a data-led strategy should never come at the exclusion of being creative and with coming up with those big ideas. So the first idea was this. What if we could allow users to actually personalize their kits within the banner themselves and add it straight to their basket? And secondly, what if, having given them those options, they didn't actually even need to use it because we'd already predicted what they wanted? I got quite excited. But of course, we did have to go back and do our due diligence. Building these ads, building the data integration, it's not a trivial thing. Time, resource. Did we think that would actually work, or was it just a hunch? So that comes back to our questions. What were we trying to achieve? Well, obviously we were trying to achieve sales. But more importantly, we were trying to achieve it by engaging people with our ads, bringing them, making it as easy as possible for them to buy. And why did we think the data would help? Why would the relevance help? So we went back, we did our due diligence. We looked at the performance of the similar functionality on site, how common it was to buy personalized shirts, and did we think this would be effective? And we were pretty confident that it would be. And this is what we came up with. So firstly, we built a ranking system for all the players based on their current form in the Premier League. We know that, as a general rule, current form is quite a good marker for popularity. We then looked at players that would be of particular interest to the customer. So we looked at their search history, who had they shown particular interest in, and we also knew what they'd been looking at on site, what current products were of particular interest to them. And this started kind of prioritizing. But then we knew that relevance is really important to get the attention. So we said, well, let's look at the content that the ad is showing next to. Is it about a particular player? And if so, let's prioritize that player. And finally, we wanted to ensure that there's a continuous user experience across these ads. We wanted them to be really useful. So if someone had already interacted with the ad, we wanted to make sure that the next ad would pick up exactly where they left off. So whoever that player was, we would show that to them. And we were fairly confident this would work, but we weren't sure, so we had to go back to those questions again. How would we measure the success? And how would we continue to optimize? Because to mix up my sporting references slightly, it's all about the aggregation of marginal gains. And so we went away and we set up a trial. We ran it against some randomly selected ads, so where there was no data input at all, and we looked to see how it worked. And given the fact that I've chosen to talk to you about it today, it might not surprise you to find out that it was really successful. We saw clicks and interactions both increased significantly, so people interacting with the ads and those who actually went through. And as a result of all that traffic, we were able to smash targets. And best of all, by being able to demonstrate the results, we brought home the first silverware of the season for Liverpool. As they have discovered in recent years, the idea of beautiful football alone isn't always enough to win you trophies. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic, dig in, and really get those results out. What about then if we look at the buying side of things? So while we're with football, we might as well stick with it. What if we're trying to sell this shirt? Our best approach to shopping that we have found so far, within the parameters of what Google allows, is to structure our accounts in such a way that we can bid not just on individual products, but also at a query level as well. And given that's the case and we are able to do that, it makes sense that the more data you have, the more efficient you can be in deciding those bids. So what do we know about this product? Well, it's kit. More precisely, it's a home kit, it's for women, and it's got Salah on the back. And what about in terms of performance metrics? Perhaps it's got about roughly an average conversion rate, but a high click-through rate. But it is actually a top-selling women's product, and it gets a lot more clicks from women than it does from men. And then what about the impact that the name Salah has on the back? Well, we know he's really popular, but Salah's not exactly been at his most prolific right now. So how does all of that impact? And more particularly, if we're using Google Merchant Center, how do we fit it into those constraints? We're only allowed 5 custom labels, 1 value per product on each of those, and only 1,000 unique values that might sound like a lot, but quickly runs out. And that's before you even start to think about everything you know about the query and the user who searched for it. How on earth do you actually make that in an impactful way? And perhaps Google is actually doing us a favor with those limitations, because it makes us really knuckle down and focus on what will make that real impact. And we do that by first building a model based on our existing data, working out what the real things that are really impacting performance are. And then we define a meaningful categorization system, grouping products in a way that will allow them to generate the most impact. And as ever, we set up our reporting so that we can learn and build a feedback loop back in. So on a very simple level, that might mean grouping all your metrics that you've got. Think on-site performance, cross-channel performance, all the product data, and just simply looking what are the 5 things that make the most difference to overall performance. And anyone can do that. You can do that in Excel. Or you can be more sophisticated. You can start looking at the relationships between these metrics, their combined influence, and then define some single metric as a function of all this, what you might call a performance coefficient, which you can then feed into your bidding strategies. And then once you've got that, you can start looking at how you tailor that, maybe for different demographics, for different external factors. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking this sounds an awful lot like machine learning. And well, yes, there's a reason machine learning is so successful. But I think what I have hopefully demonstrated is that machine learning is just one end of a spectrum that starts with really good data practice with those basic principles. Absolutely, if you have access to the resource and the expertise, I would always advocate for you to use it. But it's important to remember that machine learning, if it's not based on solid foundations, is liable to go a bit off-piste. You have to really understand how you're setting it up. And if you don't have machine learning available to you, the same principles apply, and it's a great point to demonstrate what you can really do with your data. So those good principles, if I had to sum them up just to finish off, I would say firstly, it's to measure. Make sure you're always starting from the data. You have a good chance of it working. Secondly, be measured. Don't throw the kitchen sink at what you're doing. Think about it. Start from a point that you know will work, optimize from there, and build it up. And third, measure again. Make sure you know what's working, you know what's not working, and you keep feeding that back. And while you're doing all that, don't forget to be creative. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. Put that there. Well done, Anna. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. There's a couple of questions before you dash off. There's one, but if you do have questions, it's Slido, sli.do, NMPignite. So put your questions on there, and I'll put them to Anna. There's somebody who's there's 2 questions on here. The first one is, football is inherently a VUCA thing, right? How much impact does the team or the player performance have on the sales performance online?
It depends. It both has a significant impact and less than you think as well. I think on a macro level, absolutely. If the team's doing well, if it's got a really good feeling about it, I think that's certainly the case with Liverpool at the moment, then you do see that success. And we have done analysis looking at the impact of individual matches, and sometimes you see that there as well. If it's a match that really makes a difference to the position, if it's a match that puts them in a Champions League winning position, for instance, that has an absolutely significant effect. Then you have other matches that don't have that much impact. So it's a case of looking at across, get a whole season's worth of data, look at those trends across. What actually is it about those results that drives the performance, and how do we leverage that?
Good, thank you. Now, I've got one other question, but please do put them through, or put your hand up and Lisa will bring the mic around. So if you do have a question, raise your hand and we'll take the mic. I think I might know who put this one up, and it hasn't been approved, but I'm going to say it anyway. Who do you fear more, or what do you fear more? Pogba, Salah, or VUCA?
I would like to say at this point, I promise I'm not really a football fan.
You're not a football
So it does not impact my life at all. So I'll have to say VUCA.
VUCA, very good. One's just come in. Where is the data coming from? Where is the data?
In the example I talked about, yeah. It's a combination of sources. So the performance data is coming from fantasy football league data. that is used for all the sort of information you get there, which we've just leveraged and we've turned into something that's usable for us.
How do you access that data?
Via an API. So we've built a tool that takes it from an API, regularly updates it, builds it into a feed, which goes into our dynamic creative. So that then turns it into a weighting that determines how frequently each player is shown. The search data we get from third-party sources. We obviously have our own first-party data on site. And the contextual, again, is a feature of the DSPs that we work with.
Very good. I'm not sure this is a question and hasn't been approved, but I'm going to say it again. From Maz. Where's Maz? Thank you. Many years ago, I heard the phrase, if you're standing still, you're moving backwards. Sounds similar to the phrase that I put up earlier. This was used to describe the progress of Premiership football. Any comment?
No comment.
There's no question mark there. From Gareth Neville. Gareth Neville's in the crowd. What data partners do you use?
So we work a lot with Google. So DV360 provides a lot of data within there that we use. We also leverage various other DSPs for sources where that's available. We tend to pick it on a process of whatever fits the bill for that time. And we're always willing to look around and see what's out there. I think we don't have a particular preference.
Very good. I've just seen the clapperboard at the back. So there's one more question. Please find Anna at the break and she'll happily answer that question for you if it's yours. Thanks very much, Anna. So without further ado, and straight into our next speaker, Naomi Lopez is from BTTV, and she's going to come up and join us on stage to talk about how digital transformation within BTTV is helping them to succeed in this changing world. So please, round of applause for Naomi Lopez. Nice music. There you go. There's a green button.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. It's quite funny that I'm talking about digital transformation and I'm bringing my handwritten notes, but yeah, let's keep them close. Yeah, I'm here to talk to you about digital transformation and how can it help businesses to get better, and all of us to get better. So you may be familiar with the motto, you think big, you get big. But today we live in a world that is constantly changing. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of new opportunities for all of us in our day-to-day life. And at the same time, our companies started to go digital and started to collect more data. So nowadays we are seeing that they get a lot of information from customers, lots of information from competitors, market changes, all the news, everything taking place at the same time. So there are lots of open questions. And probably the motto makes more sense if it moves to you get big data and then you think big. It's like digitalization is enabling us to create that space to be able to stop and think, which nowadays seems so difficult in our day-to-day lives. So disruption is the new black. We saw in the examples that Luke provided before how new business models arose and went successful in a very short time, while others were really struggling. And actually, these days we are living a real crisis in the retail sector. We are seeing since 2013, 1 in 5 shops in UK closed. And this is due to many factors. There are economical factors, etc. But definitely doing the things that they were doing in the past was contributing to this. And staying behind in digital transformation has had a great cost for these companies. Does this mean that these companies are meant to disappear? No. It only means that these companies are encouraged or are entitled to review their business model and to move into something completely different. For example, we see the Toys R Us example that Luke presented before. That was hurtful for me to see, because when I was a kid, I liked a lot Toys R Us and everything, but this is not working anymore. today, people are looking for personal experiences. First of all, experiences that make us feel something different. But going into a huge store and wandering around looking for the perfect gift for our niece or nephew is not what we are expecting to do, and we don't even have the time. And that is one of the reasons why that model is not working. So on this, you would wonder, one of 5 clothes shops closed in this period since 2013. What came in those stores? Most of the cases, they open hair salons, nail salons, or beauty salons. And that is because that is telling us that the customers are looking for a tangible experience, something that they can get on them, and leave. And also make them feel differently, make them feel good, like a haircut. A good one will make your day. A bad one will kill your whole 2 months or whatever. So then I'm going to give you an example of how one traditional shop can do with digital transformation and being good at being digital. Providers are giving all the technology and all the innovation that can help this type of businesses to get the best of their big expertise and the best of the service that they are providing, and move into something new that don't only compete with the e-commerce retailers, but also give the customer something extra. So for example, let's see a wine shop. I cannot think of more traditional businesses, especially being Spanish. So you have the old shop. It has cost with the rent. It has cost with the staff. It has cost due to the stock that they have. But if they have a good digital positioning, they will start to compete with e-commerce retailers. But the new technologies also enable this business to move one step forward and maybe ahead of that competition. What if this shop starts to providing you a real-time service? So let's say I'm scrolling in my tablet. I'm looking for the wine that I want for tonight's dinner, and all of a sudden I click on one of those, and someone on the other side appears. Someone who really understands of wines, is the staff in this shop, and gives me advice and tells me, "Oh, I see you are clicking on this type of wine. We have these options," and all of a sudden I see them in my laptop, in my tablet. I click on one, and he's telling me, I think this is a very good decision, or maybe I suggest you to go for this other. And give you some reasons. And this is hitting in all the boxes that we as customers are looking for at the moment, which is value, convenience, and also experience, especially experience. And on the business side, that business owner can reduce some cost. Maybe they don't want to go with the physical shop anymore. Or maybe they want to explore other business lines, as providing wine tasting in the shop, which is, again, an advantage with their competitors. So something that we are doing is, and something that this new combination of technology and digitalization enables is to put customer first. So we now live with ecosystems. Everything is connected. Everything is connected, even if it's not provided by the same companies. And we as customers have very high experience, because there are some businesses that are doing great. So we cannot tolerate anymore to call to a call center and being told, "Oh, call tomorrow," because our systems are not getting updated. It's like, really? Are you kidding me? So we are enabling that to stop, but also we are enabling companies to get on top of the game and be able to predict when customers are starting to change their behaviors, are starting to move patterns, so they can communicate more effectively with them at the right time and using the right channels. This is also enabling us to put not only our customers but our employees first, because with the correct systems, you will find that, that the company, when in a call center, let's say, they need to be attending a very pissed off customer. They're empowered because they have the right knowledge in the right time about the problem, and they can do a proper diagnostics. And additionally, in most of the cases, those customers won't need to bother to call because the problem would have been identified much earlier, and they will be proactive on fixing it, so the customer won't be bothered. But this goes beyond what we can do in our businesses and what we can do for our customers and employees. This goes for us as we are all in the middle of this change, of this technology change, information change, and this can also help us to face the biggest problems that we have in the humanity, as for example, the climate change. So I learned recently that the fashion sector is the second most impacting on the environment. This makes sense. 4 seasons, and then you go to shops, and in 2 weeks' time you have a complete set of clothes, and 85 of them end up in the bin and incinerated. By applying different technologies, as for example augmented reality, we can move into completely new models of creation, of production, and also of stock management. So let's say, what if you already know your customers' needs since the beginning, and you know exactly what is the production that you need to have, and you can do that with big data. You can also apply augmented reality instead of having all the clothes in the figurines. So if I walk on the street, I may walk past a store, and I may be seeing a dress for a wedding that by chance they know that I have next summer and that I was looking for. And they may show that to me in augmented reality. It doesn't, the dress doesn't need to be there. They can, now we are providing the right level of speed and the right level of latency for the images to look so real that we don't even need the things to be there. And we will be seeing that. So to me, it looks like we need to start thinking that we need to all this digitalization, all this automation to happen. It comes to help us, but it cannot replace us. The computers can think and learn, can process data better and faster than we do, but they don't have imagination, they don't have creativity, they don't have emotion, and they don't have empathy as to realize what is important and what can really make an impact. So, and I think I'm ahead of time. So from this talk, what I would like you to get is, it's important to get the right innovation, embrace that to get ahead of the game with transformation, and then be able to create that space to think in order for you to think bigger. And when you do that, don't forget to dream even bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's come up from the audience. And I'm going to combine a couple of questions here, and they're good. They're challenging the concept of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So do customers really want an experience above all else?
Mm-hmm.
Uber, the archetypal disruptor, but isn't their success due to value and convenience? And I suppose I'll add a little bit to that and say, well, what's the difference between good value and convenience that provides a good experience and some of these these higher technology options that you've put forward?
Well, my view is that a good experience is either providing something that makes you think, wow, in the sense of bringing you something new, or that it fixes a problem much better than anybody else. And to me, that is exactly what Uber does. So I don't know about you, but I was the one that always had to stop at an ATM when I was in a taxi to get cash to pay. And that was really inconvenient, because if I was in a taxi, I was probably very late. So when Uber arrived and I don't even need to bother about having my card with me, it's really good. And that to me is also a wow experience. It doesn't need to be bringing you something fantastic. Yeah, it's just also saying, oh, come on, this is so brilliant. This makes my life so easy, because our lives are complicated now enough.
Indeed. So sometimes it's just making things easier, taking the friction out of them. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Naomi. So our next speaker is going to be talking about a topic that is hot at the moment, no doubt about it. And it's a topic that I think the term bifurcation perfectly describes quite well. It's almost one of these things that you do or do not. It's very binary in its sense. There's a mystery to in-housing, and I want to welcome Leo McIntosh, who I've known for many years. He's a wonderful guy, and I think you're going to really enjoy his presentation, to help take some of the mystery out of in-housing your marketing management. Leo, if you'd like to come up, please. Hit the green one.
Get rid of that thing. So I'm here to talk to you about in-housing and trying to unveil all these secrets and all these benefits you can get from it, which are just tied down in marketing speak at the moment. So what I want to convey is that it is the in thing, it is trending. Try and give a definition to what in-housing actually is. Break it down for things that you can use yourself and that will be useful for you, and how you personally can succeed with it. So, to echo what's been said previously, we do live in times of change, and in-housing has come up more and more over the last 18 months. There's a lot of noise around it, though, and the conversation is full of contradiction. We've all heard stories of brands toing and froing with what they in-house. We've all read mixed reports of the successes of in-housing. We've seen some agencies trying to challenge the very concept of in-housing at every turn. But one thing that isn't in dispute is that it's on the rise. More and more brands are looking at in-housing and exploring the opportunities that will lie within. And it's easy to see why, because there are a lot of inherent benefits that come with in-housing. You can take control and gain more efficiency with your budgets. You can also get rid of those shackles that can come with contracts to external parties and be more agile to evolve the opportunities that may come forth. And you get to minimize risk as well. If one of these relationships with some of these external parties fail, then you have the agility and the security to know that you can continue as you have been and maintain some of your marketing capabilities. So what is in-housing? We know it's good. We know a lot of brands are currently using in-housing for mixed results, but can we put a definition of it? And can we actually get clarity so we can apply it upon ourselves? Well, if you read up the definition of in-housing, you may find yourself more confused and a bit more deflated. To bring functions or services into your organization's capabilities, which I think we can all agree is a bit dull, quite unhelpful, and not really practical to us. And it can all be a bit intimidating, especially when all you hear are brands doing in-housing themselves. And if you don't know exactly where to start, then you may feel yourself a bit lost. So let's break down in-housing, and let's try and make it applicable for yourselves. And how do we make this whole in-housing concept a bit easier to unpack? Well, first things first, in-housing is easier than you may think. In-housing is quite a fluid concept, and it works along a spectrum. It is not black and white. In fact, I think it's more blue and yellow on that slide. And you can really tailor it to your business needs. Regardless of the size of your organization, you can take as much or as little as you want in-house. You can dive in at the deep end or just dip your toe in. So try to filter out the noise. Try to be inspired rather than intimidated by all that you see around you. And make sure you're planning accordingly when first going about in-housing. And if you do filter out the noise and you read through exactly what brands are doing when they're in-housing, they tend to fall within 4 distinct buckets. They're either in-housing the people, in-housing technology, in-housing data, or in-housing their strategy more. So let's go into detail in what these all mean. So when you first think of in-housing, you probably think of people. When you're in-housing these new capabilities, how do I make sure that the team are ready to handle these new responsibilities? And it can be quite an overwhelming ask to begin with, because you have to keep in mind what their capabilities are. Do they have the best chances of success? Do you need additional resource? This may require you to restructure, recruit, retrain, or a combination of all 3. If you don't know where to start, it could leave you feeling a bit lost. So take a deep breath when going about this and prioritize. Audit what your current capabilities are and don't rush into anything too soon. It may be that you just retrain a few individuals that are currently within your organization first before recruiting an entire team. But make sure you audit first and plan ahead before going full throttle, because we've seen there have been a few cases where in-housing has not been thoroughly thought through, and it's led to a lot of backpedaling. We at DQ&A have had experience through all areas of this. We've sat in interviews during some of our partners' recruitment process. We've supplied resource when they're trying to recruit themselves. And we also have led on training. For one luxury travel company, Original Travel, we created a full training syllabus for them to make sure they had the up-to-date best practices in optimization and media execution. Make sure they can hit the ground running when they joined the newly onboarded team. But what are these people actually working with? We need to keep in mind the technology. If the team reaches barriers and dead ends when using their technology, then they're unable to hit the best results. And in this modern marketing world, where we're all striving for full customer centricity, you need to make sure all your technology is talking to each other. And if your marketing campaigns are being run by technology held over there somewhere, then you may be missing valuable insights. So what you can do is forge relationships with the ad tech and martech platforms themselves. This allows you to own the technology and gives you peace of mind on technology costs. Of course, people over there can still run the campaigns through your technology, but it means you'll be more agile and future-proof for what comes next. And if we look at data, which is always a big topic, what often comes up is ownership of data. You could argue that the data that comes out of your marketing campaigns is actually more valuable than the marketing campaigns themselves. And if your marketing campaigns are being performed by someone over there, then it can be a real tug of war to try and get your data and your insights. So own the technology, own the data, own your campaigns. Make sure that the insights that come from your campaigns are feeding into your data warehouse, being analyzed by your BI, organized by your CRM, and executed in your campaigns. If this data workflow is interrupted And if you're hitting dead ends when trying to get this data, then it means you're missing valuable insights that could make or break your future campaigns and could inform your future strategy. And talking about strategy, you've probably all gone through this scenario where you're tasked with coming up with a digital strategy for the next few years. You'll reach out to your channel owners, you'll reach out to your external parties, and you ask for their input. And they'll pitch to you a new proprietary tech, a new platform, or a new service, or new rebranding. And it may all be well and good for putting money in their pockets, but is it really in line with your business objectives and your business goals? It can be quite a gamble to pick exactly what works for you and make sure that you profit at the end of the day. So make sure you own the strategy and take lead on it and in-house the strategic overview. No one knows your brand better than you. And when you do reach out to others to help with your strategy, make sure they're impartial consultants or advisors. What they'll be able to do is impartially look at the landscape ahead, partially look at what they predict coming, make sure you have the most up-to-date insights available to make strategic decisions. For Invesco, an investment management company, DQ&A audited their entire digital capabilities at the moment and are working with them to help them hit their ambitious targets. So those are the 4 areas which we've seen in housing fall into. But how do you take that and where do you go if you want to start? Well, we think it's always best, and me personally, I love a spreadsheet. We always think it's best to start with a framework. This is DQ&A's framework. What we do is we take all of our clients through what we call the 4 Ds: discover, design, deploy, and develop. In the discovery phase, we audit and review your performance and current ways of working, and we ask a few questions. It could be what challenges you foresee. It could be where we think you can improve, and we have an impartial look at where your potential lies. When we get to the design phase, we make sure that we don't crowbar in a solution that won't work for you. And we may have found in the discovery phase that a full rollout won't necessarily benefit you. So we can scale back as needed and make sure you work at a pace you're comfortable with. Then we get to deploy. And of course, deployment, there's always a risk of disruption. You're changing the ways of working, so we'll make sure we hold your hand while you re-establish your internal processes. You make sure you train staff along the way and keep you updated with how we're getting on with the deployment phase. And finally, we get to develop. And this is where we encourage everyone to keep the conversation open. Just because you've completed one in-housing project doesn't mean that's it and you can rest on your laurels. Of course, in this industry, we're always evolving. So continue the conversation with your advisors, continue looking into the marketplace and seeking opportunities to evolve. So where do you go from here? If you're curious to start in housing and want to take the first steps, this is what we'd advise. Try not to be overwhelmed by all the intimidating coverage that can come about within housing. Be excited. Filter out the noise. Make sure you tailor and audit what works for you, and then implement at your own pace and your own comfort. Understand what you want to achieve and form a plan. Don't execute anything that could lead to a significant impact on your ways of working and your internal processes until you've completely got peace of mind in the timelines and the logistics. Don't try to do everything at once and make sure you set realistic timelines. And be open to opportunities and advice. Once you reach the end of this tunnel, monitor your competitors, monitor your market conditions, and be open to evolving. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leo. Put that on there. So we've got time for 2 questions.
All right.
I must admit, it's slightly uncomfortable sitting here hearing you talk about in-housing, but you know, it's something that is happening and we need to embrace that. Does it mean that the agency is dead, not needed anymore? How does the agency play into this model?
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot of expertise that are in agencies at the moment. So we just need to, I think agencies just need to evolve and see how they leverage that expertise. It may be building a consultancy within the agencies.
Hello?
It may just be. But I think, yes, there's a lot of knowledge in agencies at the moment. So they shouldn't feel too threatened. They should just be agile and evolve with the requirements and yes, use that knowledge and try and answer their clients' needs and questions.
And why don't businesses move in-house quicker? What are the barriers to doing it by tomorrow?
Well, I think it is something that you definitely shouldn't rush into because it can be quite disruptive. There are examples of a few, such as Intel, an agency inside, where they've made in-house too soon without considering everything. So I do think a proper plan is required first. Consider the disruption, consider the restructuring needed, and be realistic in your timelines and build a business case.
Build a business case. Cool. Thank you very much,
Well,
Leo.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Let's get into the second session. Our next speaker is the head of retail for Google Marketing Platform and is going to come on stage and talk about sustainable growth in an unstable time, looking at some innovations that are occurring within Google. So please join me and welcome Abigail Bear to the stage. There we go. The green button.
Brilliant.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Bayer.
Bayer.
Bayer. It's an unusual one. It actually
And I
means
come back on.
cowshed. But I used to be cod before I got married, so I feel like it's a bit of an upgrade compared to that. So
What does Bayer mean?
it means cowshed in Old English. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. If you go up to Scotland, apparently there's lots of Bayers up there. So you find them there. Well, thank you for having me today. It's super to be here with you all. So I'm going to take you through a few short slides of what we're doing, what we're talking to our customers about, particularly in the retail sector, about how they can really leverage data and technology in this new and stable world that we've been hearing about this morning. So I think it might be a bit of a recap from this morning and hopefully a good segue into this afternoon. So moving on, so this picture, I tried to find a woman waking up. The only one I could find was full of makeup. They all look like they're all so glamorous. Who are these women that go to bed like that? This is definitely not me in the morning. But how many of you wake up and the first thing you do is go to your phone? It's so common. Most of us have it as our alarm clock for starters. But personal admission, I probably spend at least 3 hours a day on my phone. If you look at the stats, it's shocking. Probably unlock it 100 times a day. About 200 notifications. It's crazy. That digital wellbeing app is doing us no favours because it makes you realise how much we use our phones. But this makes you realise how much access we have to information, and it's like never before. But the problem with all this information is we've got too much choice. And this photo is a Gursky picture, and actually sold. It's the most expensive, I think, I've sold at auction ever. 3.3 million this photo sold for. But what I love about it, it's a 99-cent store, I think in LA, and you can just see the vast array of choice. And that's what our brains have to deal with, this amount of choice in products. And that's without 1.5 billion websites that we also have access to. Pretty crazy, hey? So although we're amazing, we've got all this choice, we get fatigued, we're tired. It's so hard for us to think and make all these choices every day. So we turn to technology, and we've talked about this a lot. You've seen this on a lot of slides already today, whether it's through convenience and speed of being able to pay by your phone or by your watch, or whether it's being able to curate playlists or content, or even think about maybe food that you want to eat. There's technology to help us in all these areas, and we turn to it immediately. This is what we think about retail, right? So retail was all about price, assortment, and convenience, but it was also about curation. You trusted a retailer to be able to source and find all the right brands that they believe would be the right ones for you. But that's moved beyond those times right now. So even though you can still go into John Lewis and find a lovely array of products that they've personally selected, we know that there's more choice out there. And we were going to go across those 1.5 billion websites to find it. I was looking for a kettle the other day. I was not going to be satisfied with the 5 reviews on John Lewis, so I went to Amazon to see what reviews they had, and then to another shop to see what reviews they had. We want reviews. We want our own personal research. It's really important for us to go on that journey. But as I said before, it's tough. We don't have time to do that in our busy lives, to be looking at all that content and all those sites. So I think brands and retailers have got a real role to play in helping us with curating these contents and creating these products and making it easier for us to shop with them. So the next one shows, like, this is about the research, right? So apparently we search for paper towels. Who are these people that search for paper towels? But even our own data shows us that we're searching more and more forever for this research. So near me searches, best doorbells. Like, we want to be empowered with this information so that when we make that choice, it's the right decision. 80%. Any guesses? Any guesses? Well, it's a bit of a trick question because there's two answers. So 80% of the adult population, that's anyone over the age of 14 in this survey, actually are buying online. But also, only 80% of, or only 20% in this sense, but 80% of actual money being transacted is still actually happening in the store. So we've got to that point of access. Everyone's got access. Everyone's using the internet. But we're still not quite there yet in terms of transactions and experience with the digital world. So I think, again, this goes back to the role of our brands and our retailers of helping move this along. So at Google, we call this the age of assistance. So what we're thinking about at Google is how we utilize all this wealth of data that we've got access to and how we use machine learning. If we had more time today, we could go into a lot more detail in that, but I was going to briefly touch on it. But it's about how we actually give our customers and our users, we understand them and we give them that curation of content that we talked about earlier, that helping them with the tasks that need to get done, and just make it that easy day-to-day process when they wake up in the morning. For those of you that have got a Google Home or Alexa, we talked about earlier, you know, that helps you on your day-to-day journey. I wake up in the morning, I can ask it what the weather's going to be like, what my tube status is going to be, and it even knows that my journey to work, so it will tell me if there's going to be any delays on my journey. So it's all about predicting intent. And we talk a lot about that as well at Google and with our customers about how can we really help you utilize all the data that you've got access to really predict intent and help get on that front foot with your customers and help them with those difficult decisions that they have to make day to day. And it's about continuously learning. So you don't just run a machine learning model, maybe think about, oh, this is great, I can now know this about my customers, I'm going to serve them this ad. It's about the continuous learning and that process of continuously looking at those models and retraining it and re-looking at your data. It shouldn't be a one-off thing that we do. So what can our brands do and how can they interact with this? So I've split them into three areas. So acceleration, so bringing data to the heart of everything we do in your business that we've just talked about. Connecting, so this is being present. So wherever your customers are, whatever channel they're in, and being present in that moment. And finally, delivering amazing assistive experiences. So whether that is through Uber, we talked about this morning or this afternoon about being that immediate thing you can go to, and you don't have to think about it. It'll get you where you want to be to where you want to get to without you have to think about the journey or how you're going to do it. So I think let's think about some of those ways that we can do that as brands as well. So the first one is it's all about data and machine learning, as I just mentioned. So we want to be thinking about how we can predict and think about what's next for our customers. So we've got tons of examples of how brands are really now starting to use their first-party data. They're going to run models on this. They're going to start to really understand who their audiences are and start to really customize and tailor the experiences. We talk a lot about storytelling in marketing. And I think now we're at a point where we've got so much information and so much data, it almost becomes too difficult. So sometimes you have to go back to basics, and I think one of the ladies mentioned that earlier, like don't try and run before you can walk, but try and think about how you can start to simply look and segment your audiences and start to really tailor those messages. An example from Listerine here, where they did some storytelling, understood who their audiences were and customized the messages at different stages of the journey into different segments. And actually they found that for those videos that were customized, they had a 30% uplift in terms of view-through rate. So it really does make a difference when you can get the messaging right to the customer. And I know you can all see thousands of examples of this from your own brands and from all our partners out there that are doing this already. But I think one thing is understanding your audience, but the next thing is getting the messaging right. And I see so many times customers are like, oh, I've got a data management platform, I've got all this data, but yet they're still sending the same message to all those audiences and expecting magic to happen. You have got to think about how you're going to tailor the content. And a lot of technology is making it easier now that you can make slight changes or slight tweaks and to make a difference without having to produce 500 assets for each campaign. And then finally, this is on to Connect, which is all about thinking about how we're going to connect with them at each stage of their journey. So in the Google world, you'll notice that we do a lot of Google shopping, and we've talked about that as well, I think, today. And that's one way we're helping customers with sort of curating a lot of that content and helping that experience at that point. And this is what we think the future might look like in terms of when you search. So can you imagine that when you're searching for Nike, you had all this amazing content and not just what you've got at the moment, which is just a sea of text on a page? So this is what we're thinking about in terms of what we think the future might look like for curating that content when you're searching for a brand. If you search for something like a washing machine at the moment or a fridge freezer, it's a pretty dull experience, and we think that brands should be aiming for an experience like this, and Google should be helping to aid that as well. And another story about connecting the online and offline world, because it is about that full experience end to end. So Matalan did some work with us to help understand the value of digital and how that was impacting their in-store sales, because they were finding they were spending all this money on digital, but they weren't really seeing the benefit of it. As we talked about earlier, majority is still spent in store. So the work they did to be able to understand this, they actually found out that actually for every £1 they were spending on, say, mobile search ads, it was actually driving £46 in sales, which £31 of that were in store. So it really helped them to understand that journey. And because they've got all this data, they could then start to think, well, are they new or are they returning customers? What are the product sets that actually are driving customers in store? I think they found like school uniforms, for example, where you need it now, is one of the key areas, or luggage, which they found were really performing badly in online, but when they actually took into account offline sales, was actually doing really well. So it's thinking about trying to connect the story across all parts of your puzzle of the customer journey. And then finally, driving action. So this is all about how we get to remove that friction and make it a really seamless experience for our customers, whether that's in your stores, on your websites, on your apps. And really, how can you be that assistant? There's so many brands out there now that help curate their content, give you great filters, but there's so many doing it badly. Like Boots, for example. The other day I was looking at children's clothes. They still can't get the sizing right. There was like 5 different versions of age 1 to 2 because some had gaps in them, some didn't, some were the ampersand and some were the line. Like, it's really hard for brands to do this. We know it's difficult, but I think we need to think about how we're helping the consumer to make that digital journey really work for them. An example I'm going to show you, my last example today, is from RS Components. So not a brand you'd imagine to be at the top of the times in terms of digital and brands. They're a B2B brand. But actually, for them, it was really important. They have thousands and thousands of products. And they had 1.4 million pages that they had to get mobile ready. So this was done at a board level. They made a big decision to invest in this and to invest with the right developers, the right people, and the right partners, and actually resulted in them a 29% uplift in mobile conversions. Because they had the right technology in place and the right experience for their customers. So again, a great example of how they've taken a customer problem and they've really used technology to aid that and really help and improve their business at the same time as helping their customers. So I'll leave that there, and this is a quote from Benedict Evans, and I'm sure many of you watched his presentation from 2018, but it really comes back to the access story is reaching the end. So we talk about that curve of where we wanted to get to in terms of people having access to the internet. We're pretty much there, right? Everyone's got access to the internet. But it's saying the story is just the beginning in terms of how we're using it. And I think the next 15 years is going to be really exciting, seeing how machine learning is shaping that and data and technology are really changing these customer experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abigail. That's fascinating. There's some questions come in, so I've probably got time for about 2 or 3. The first one is, please could you clarify the 80% slide? Could you pop back to that one?
Do you want me to go back?
Clarify the 80% slide.
Okay, so this was the 80% of people are shopping online. Where are we going? Oh.
There you go.
Here we go. So 80% of the adult population are shopping online, but still 80% of the transactions are still in store. So they're actually in store rather than online.
Got it.
Yeah.
We talk about personalization, but when does it cross the line to being creepy?
Yeah, a good point. That's something that we have to talk to our clients a lot about. And I actually work in the tech side of our business, so definitely very much top of mind conversation. So Yeah, so I think where it gets creepy is where, you know, you're using too much personal information in that information. They shouldn't know that you've been on and looked at hay fever tablets and now you're retargeting them with hay fever. I mean, that becomes quite personal, particularly if it's a medical profession. I think it's about being relevant, but without crossing the line with the data. So you might know they've got a huge sporting interest, so you might make the content more relevant to people that are sports fans, a bit like the Listerine example earlier. But it doesn't mean that you have to go, hi Bob, I know you like sport, so you know, here's something I found for you. So I think it's about getting the messaging right and being careful with how you use that data. Yeah. And again, don't just spam them with loads and loads of the same ad, of the same thing they've looked at, and make sure you're using your data. They might have bought it 2 days ago. And I think that's what gives digital ads a really bad name, is when we see this repetition. And it should be about the storytelling. And I think we'll come into the world more and more where we're thinking about it's the right content for that sort of cluster of audiences.
And we've been talking a long time about online to offline and vice versa, but what's the latest thinking about measuring from clicks to bricks or bricks to clicks? Yeah,
so that is the biggest question on everyone's lips at the moment, particularly for example, like CPG guys who really don't know all their digital advertising is driving in-store with retailers. So we're doing a lot of work, whether it's working with loyalty card programs or third-party providers like LiveRamp, who can try and do that matching. So they can take maybe, if you're a tech player, you probably people register your products, so you've got that email address. So you can try and connect using a third party, try and do that cookie matching in a safe space with a third-party provider, and then bring that into the digital world to be able to target those customers.
Just final question, what percentage of retailers are doing that?
Doing it well.
Doing it well, yeah.
I don't know if I've got a percentage off the top of my head, but in terms of like thinking about those that are the most multi-moment sort of thinking, I'd say it's probably only about sort of 5% that have got to that point. So
there's a lot of progress.
There's still a lot of way to go, but yeah, in a good space.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right,
really
thank you.
It. Thank you, Abigail. So our next speaker, now on both screens, Andrew Henry is Director of Client Services at creative production company Joystick. Andrew's going to be talking about audio specifically. We've referenced a couple of times the audio assistants. It also goes beyond that. So please welcome Andrew Henry to the stage. Green button.
Right there, the green one. Thank you for my theme song. Hello, everybody. My name's, yes, let me move that, please. Hi, I am Andrew Henry. I'm VP Client Services with Joystick. Going to speak a little bit about audio and why we definitely should not be calling it a comeback. To give a little bit about background on me and where I'm from, I am from Joystick. We're a creative services marketing agency focusing on everything from display, rich media, to websites and app creation. And about myself, I am from the great state of New Jersey, where we are taught to breathe and live Bruce Springsteen. And Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey was the first album I ever owned. And if you'll allow me to indulge just for a moment, I think I'd like to talk about the music formats that I've had to go through in my life. I think it speaks to change at the topic at hand. So certainly when I started, Bruce was on the radio. That's how I heard his songs. After that, I bought my first vinyl record, able to listen to it at home whenever I wanted to. That gave way to the cassette tape. Now I was portable. I could listen to Bruce anywhere I went. But not too long, because then I got the compact disc, or the CD. Very good, high quality sound, but not as great as the iTunes version of the album I had to buy. That's the 4th time I bought this album. And that was fantastic, and I can listen to it everywhere. But now I've returned to Sirius XM radio and listen to E Street Radio. And so why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I think it's a great example of change and how change can be a very weird thing. I think change happens in a lot of weird ways, strange ways, ways that don't make a lot of sense. It's not necessarily linear, which is why I'm going to talk about audio ads and how they are on the rise. So 3 topics I'm going to talk about briefly today. why the return of audio ads, what are some of the best practices and considerations when creating audio ads, and then also how will audio continue to expand in the future with voice. So talking about audio ads, back in the day it was mostly radio advertising. And a fun trivia fact here, advertising by audio actually predates radio broadcasting. In the late 1800s, with the invention of the telephone, there was actually a thing called telephone newspapers, where you could hold your phone up to your ear and someone was just reading the news, reading entertainment, and brands could actually pay for a very quick little spot in that. And that was the first audio ad. That, of course, progressed to radio advertising. After that, we moved into billboards, then print, email, display, video. And as the progression there of advertising happened, I think the respect for audio went down a little bit. It certainly was always still present, but it went down. I think a great example of this is video advertising. So at Joystick, we make video ads all the time. And it's always common best practice to put subtitles over the video with the understanding that most people are not going to click on the audio and not going to listen to it. It's just expected that the video is more important, don't worry about the audio. So that's sort of what happened. I think recently, there's a few factors of why audio's picking back up. These are certainly not all the reasons. One, podcasts. I just read a week ago there are 660,000 podcasts in production right now. So that is, and Spotify just purchased, I think, a third podcast production company. So that's certainly a big factor. Music streaming services, another huge factor. Adobe recently released a report that most consumers listen to 1 to 5 hours of music streaming services a week, and that's on the low end. High end, 11 hours a week. So between the podcast, the music streaming services, and voice assistants, which I'm actually going to speak to a little bit, I think that really we're understanding that audio is everywhere. It's in our cars, our homes, at work, in the gym. It's around us all the time. So in addition to being so present, audio is just fast. It's a very fast medium to convey a message, to make an emotional connection with a user. So what makes a good audio ad? I'm not going to talk about every single thing that's on here, but I think probably I can combine a few of them. Understanding your audience and the context. When you're creating an audio ad, is it for a music streaming service? Is it for a podcast? Is it for a jazz channel or a rock and roll channel? Think of the context of where the user is going to be listening to your audio ad. And then also you want to keep it brief and memorable. Unlike a display ad where the user is going to be seeing something, most people with an audio ad are not going to be looking at any screen. So you need them to listen and to really comprehend and understand what you'd like them to do. Is that a promo code? Is that visiting a website? Whatever it is, it just needs to be memorable. We have some best practices for audio ads here. On the right side, obviously, those are the general specs. The two things I'm going to talk about on this frame, one, the companion asset. So I know I just said people don't look at the screen, but you still can create a companion asset that'll be on the screen while the audio is playing. However, as I said earlier, do not anticipate that they're going to actually be looking at a screen when your ad is playing. The other thing is to really lean into the audience's imagination. You can have a great ad with copywriting and music and sound effects, but let the audience, they're gonna bring something else that you haven't even thought of when they hear that ad. So you can lean into their imagination a little bit, and we have some examples that I'll be playing, which I think will help illustrate the point. So if I think I hit on this, ooh, wow.
Check, 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 yeah, that's right. The chicken wrap, now at McDonald's.
Yes, I made you all just listen to that. Right, so it's memorable, it's funny, and humor's always great. Humor's certainly hard to achieve, but if you can, it's fantastic. It's just a fantastic concept. It's for the chicken wrap. I know that this particular product had a huge uptick during the time of this campaign. So that is one example. Next example, do I hit this slide? Next example we have for you. Okay.
I want to give you some love.
I'm Captain Obvious, and Hotels.com rewards me basically everywhere. So why am I wearing a full-body wetsuit at this spa retreat? Because Hotels.com lets me do me. I like the heat, not the wet.
Hotels.com. You do you and get rewarded.
Okay. And the reason I wanted to play that one is because we do have some clients who come to us and maybe they just want to extend a campaign they already have. So if they have really great video assets and they want to figure out is there a way to make an audio ad, we do that sometimes. We can crop it, we can tweak it, figure out what makes the most sense. So we do both sort of concepting and original audio ads as well as reusing assets that are available. So audio in the future, what exactly does that look like? I don't think it necessarily looks like this, but there is a statistic that I believe by 2020, 30% of searches are going to happen without a screen. And that leads into the topic that Abigail was talking about, age of assistance, voice assistance. It says that 36% of people who have a voice-activated speaker do it because it lets them do things faster. And 69% of people enjoy it while they're doing other things. They are cooking, they are cleaning. It just makes their lives easier. And I think that we can see a clear connection between audio ads and voice assistants. On the joystick side, we have an innovations team, and we're actually working right now on voice-enabled units. I have two I'm going to show you right now.
Hi, just click any of the speech bubbles to see what it's like to control a smart home with Alexa. Alexa, turn on the coffee maker.
Okay.
Come on, coffee.
All right, so this ad, that's an ad that's controlled by the user. The user is given prompts. It's what's called a guided conversation. They're given prompts to say, and when the user says it, after enabling their microphone, the unit will behave in a certain way. We made a whole series of those units. We have one other version I'm going to show right now.
Find what you need with your voice. Say things like, I want to buy paper towels from Target. We'll need access to your microphone to get started. Thanks, we're ready to go. What would you like at Google Express?
I want to buy paper towels from Target.
Got it. You want paper towels from Target, right?
Right, so there you go. So this is an ad unit. So that's an ad unit where users can enable their mic and get a response right in the ad unit. So I don't think it's, so I think you can see a clear, oh man, my joke is going to not be as good now. I think now you can see a clear path where the audio ads and the voice assistants are going to combine into a new sort of format. And then ideally in the future, when I ask my voice assistants to please purchase the latest version of Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, it'll be beamed into my brain, was the joke. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Who'd have thought we'd listen to stories about paper towels being searched for or voice searches all in one day here?
I know, it's interesting.
It's happening.
Yeah, it is happening. Which is actually, it's one thing I think marketers need to think about in terms of educating. I'm sorry, this isn't a question. I'm just going.
Go ahead.
Educating consumers with not just saying, I'd like paper towels, right? They need to start saying the brands, especially when they're in home, because the voice assistants will just return a bunch of whatever the paper towels are, but you want your consumers and your clients to think about a specific brand and mention that brand. All right.
How do you get started with creating audio ads?
Well, good copy, certainly very important. If you have production resources, that's great. So some sort of recording studio, music, sound effects. I mean, I think any brand who really wants to sort of be, omni-channel needs to start thinking about audio ads. And now is really a great time because the market is not too cluttered yet. So now is like the time to start experimenting with audio ads and what can be done.
Your slide was helpful. Perhaps you can make that available for people afterwards on the format requirements. Perhaps. I saw a few people taking photographs. Do audio ads tend to work better for different age groups or demographics?
That's a very interesting question. I know that, in terms of those numbers that I mentioned earlier about who's listening to various things, certainly the 11 hours is the Generation Z and younger.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have enough research to give you an accurate answer right now, but I will look into it.
Very good. And final question, if there were a maturity curve, where do audio ads sit on that maturity curve right now?
I would say it's definitely I imagine in the next 6 months to a year, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that with sonic branding, which I think you and I talked about it once.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic branding, does everyone know what sonic branding is? That's a brand's audio identity.
Like at the start of your examples, like ding, 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 ding.
Exactly that. That would be the joystick audio brand. So, and certainly that's not a new thing. PlayStation has an audio sound, T-Mobile has an audio sound, but I think that all brands need to have an audio sound so that users can instantly, in a matter of seconds, recognize your brand.
I remember Sega.
That's Sega, there you go, that's a great one.
Sega.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks very much, Andrew.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So now we move into the fourth of those principal behaviors that we talked about for success in times of change, which is take responsibility. Our next speaker is Rob Herdman, Global Manager for Media and PR, a brilliant and thriving Italian fashion brand. Some people think it's Norwegian, but it's not. It's Italian. So please welcome Rob Herdman onto the stage to talk about responsibility. There you go, Rob. You're doing well.
Thanks, Luke, for the intro. Hello, everybody. First of all, apologise for the terrible picture. I clearly need to have one of those professionally shot pictures. This is the clicker. So, I come from NMPignite. It's maybe a brand that not many of you have heard about. You might know my brother and sister brands, which is North Face, Vans, and Timberland. We're all part of the same group. Today, I'm going to talk to you about taking responsibility. So when I was asked to come and present here, I was trying to think of what was the best topic of what's affecting my industry the most. And it's a realization. And it's a realization that fashion is a dirty business. I think it was Naomi was mentioning before, referencing about fashion being one of the top polluters in the world. And it's the truth. And it's something that we've realized fairly recently. There's documentaries that's been made, press has started talking about it, and it's caused a realization that, shit, the stuff that we're making is ending up in landfill. So we're in the top 5 most polluting industries in the world. 1 million tons of new clothing purchased last year in the UK is bought every single year, so new clothing every single time. Average piece of clothing in the UK lasts for less than 3 years. So we're constantly consuming stuff and constantly throwing it away. Some of us might think that we're doing a great job when we take the clothes that we don't want and we stick it in one of those dustbins that are lying around across the street, so you take it to a charity shop. Realization is that most of that stuff will end up in landfill. It's one of those hidden things that we don't really understand. And we took the realization of, shit, this is something that we need to act upon and the industry needs to change. What we've done about change, or how we enact change within this issue, is that we developed this internal philosophy, and it's a super, super simple one. It's called Make It Better. And Make It Better is something really easy for all of us in the organization to understand. And it's a philosophy all about making change over a period of time. Let's do what we were doing slightly better every single year, and we'll get to a point where we want to get to. So often we try to move too fast, that we can't enact the change quick enough, or we do things wrong. So what we've tried to do is we put out a goal that's 3 or 4 years down the line, and we move there step by step by step. And we've done this with animal-based materials. So we've removed fur, we've removed down over a period of time. We've removed chemicals that we use across our jackets and stuff like that for waterproofing over a period of time. And our next stage is to tackle this issue of massive waste. Fashion industry throws away way too much stuff, and it should be our responsibility, because we're the ones who are fueling it. We want you guys to go out and buy clothing every 6 months. We want you to change your wardrobe, because when you're changing your wardrobe, we're making more money. But we need to take responsibility for that materials that we're consuming. So this is what our big aim is next. It's going from mass production, which is I'm going to go and make 1 million pieces of clothes, and then I'm going to try and sell them. We want to be in the world where if you want it, we're going to take that demand, then we're going to make the clothing. Because for most of the time, in the mass production model, there's waste. Because we have to make the stuff first, and then we have to try and sell it. So we might not sell everything. There might be 20% of our stock that's left over at the end of it. So what happens to that? It goes into landfill. So this is what we want to try to do. So we want to shift to an on-demand model. We want to make when you guys want it. So this is our first kind of attempt. And it was a range of product that we called Zenit. If I click, it should hopefully play the video. Oh, sorry. There you go. So that was the collection that we launched. It was called Zenit. So how did this impact the waste issue that I was talking about? And how we did it was basically we looked at technology to see if we could change the way that we were actually making our clothing. So the way that this whole range was made was through a technique called digital knitting. You could imagine it to being something very similar to like 3D printing. So it's a computer-controlled machine powered by software that's making the garment in whole pieces. So you're not making products in the conventional way where you roll out a sheet of material, then you cut it into shape, and then you stitch it all together. You're having a machine 3D make a model of a product. So it's making arms, it's making chest pieces, all in one piece. So the impact on this is that we're able to cut out stages of the manufacturing process. So what we've got here along the top is the traditional manufacturing process of mass production, where you're taking thread, you're turning it into fabric, you're then treating that fabric with dyes. You then have to cut it out, you sew it together, then you finish the item, then it goes out into the stores. By doing this 3D knitting technique, you actually cut out this first initial piece. And a big part of the waste that comes is actually from the cutting out fabric. You have scraps and material that gets thrown away. In this example here, we don't have that wastage because we're going directly from the thread into the pieces that are made. So there's no wastage. So what we've been able to do here is reduce wastage by 30% in the manufacturing process. So we were tackling the issue at the start in the production phase. That's our first starting point. Our next stage was to evolve this even further. So moving forward, we've got more things to work on. This is literally just the start. So how do we go from where we are now, where we've developed new technology in order for us to make product in a different way, is that we want to actually make the customer more responsible as well. So we are now investigating and working with third parties to create some mass customization solutions. So you'll be able to, in the future, go to our website and you'll be able to design your product the way that you want to, and we'll be making that product on demand, the way that you want it. Your size, your color, the technology that you want to have in a product. So it's completely going to turn the industry on its head. We also were looking at shifting production from where we have, most of the fashion brands were all based out in Asia. That's where mass production has found its home. We want to come closer to home, and we can do that because technology is getting closer to being able to create a file, send it to an automated factory that's going to make your garments in real time, basically, and then deliver it to your door in a couple of days. So we're really investigating how we're doing that. It's going to happen this year, and we're pretty excited about trying to step into the industry and change it, because the fashion industry, as I said before, is one of the dirtiest in the world, and we all have to take responsibility for it, and we're trying to put our hand up and come up with solutions for it. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Rob. That was
Pleasure, mate.
Fascinating. Is Zenit a profitable venture for Napapiri?
So we literally launched it last fall. So with most things when you launch, it's over a longer period of time where profitability comes in.
Yeah.
So we're happy with the way that we launched it. It was very much focused in mainland Europe, mainly in Italy, and we'll be looking to expand that going forward into future seasons.
We talk about consumer behaviours changing. How much of the Instagram generation and this celeb culture that it drives has exacerbated some of the problems in fashion?
Massively, absolutely. I mean, I think you put that together with fast fashion, high street fashion. So the likes of H&M and Zara are driving these trends of buying fashion on a weekly, daily basis type of thing. The throwaway culture is there. New trends are coming around all the time, and that's been driven, as you say quite rightly, Instagram generations are really picking that up.
It is, yeah. So companies like Primark might be thriving, but there's a cost to that, to the environment.
Yep.
And then final question, can you make all types of clothes in this new method?
There are limitations at the moment. It's largely down to the thickness of the thread that you can use. So the machines that are using put quite a lot of strain onto the thread, which tends to break it. But we're at the start of this journey. So technology, as it always does, will progress and improve in a rapid pace, because all brands are looking towards this new solution now. Everyone has realized that there's something that the industry needs to do, and it is their responsibility, as I said.
There's a lot of questions. It's a very interesting topic by the looks of it. So
Yeah,
I think you'll be popular after this. So thanks very much.
Pleasure, mate.
Really good to have you. Thank you.
Man.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so we reached the final presentation of the day, and we can change the slides on the side as well. It's been a couple of years that Lisa and I have been trying to get Laura Penhall to come along and speak at one of our events. We actually went to college together down in Cornwall, and we took very different paths thereafter. I went in the direction I did, and Laura went on to be the lead physician in the Paralympics in London 2012, in Rio 2016, with the British ski team in Vancouver, I believe. She also helped to manage the successful navigation, if you like, or pedal around the globe in 80 days by a chap called Mark Beaumont, which is a fascinating story in itself, and wouldn't have been possible without Laura there to glue his teeth back in a couple of days into the journey. And then she, of course, conceptualized this crazy idea, created the plan, and led the team to be the first ever all-female crew, called the Coxless Crew, to row across the Pacific Ocean from the northern part of California to to Australia. So whilst doing all of that, as if that wasn't enough, she also chose to record a documentary. So we'll take a little look and then we'll welcome Laura onto the stage.
There's an incredible insight to be gained, to know that you can fight and overcome anything that is thrown your way.
The main reason is to test myself, to see what I'm capable of.
The story of why we're here and why we're doing it for breast cancer. You think life's too short and you really do have to live it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
154 days to go.
We haven't seen the sunshine in about a week.
You only have one life, so you might as well make the most of it.
Jesus is here!
The girls aren't going to break any records. They're actually going to establish records because this has never been done before.
Laura Penhall. There we go. Welcome.
Thank you, mate. So yeah, it's been fascinating this afternoon to kind of see, actually, although we're from very different worlds, I'm from the world of sport and you guys are from multiple different worlds in this room, but whether it's business, whether it's brands, whether it's digital, but we kind of, the thing that I see that we share potentially is that we want to engage our audiences, whatever our audience may be. We want to understand behavior and try and influence behavior change. And that's something that really, really interests me as a physio. And that's why I went to Rowan Ocean, because I wanted to put myself on the other side of the table. I've always been there supporting athletes to try and achieve their goal, to help them through performance, to get to the Olympics, to get those gold medals, or whatever their goal may be. For Mark Beaumont to cycle around the world in under 80 days. Whatever it is, I will do my utmost to make sure that they can perform at their best in whatever shape or form that takes. But I've always wanted that understanding of, well, what does it take? When I've worked with Paralympic athletes, like I've always wanted to drive, like, actually, what's driven somebody who's overcome significant adversity to go on and want to achieve something major in their life? And it's always made me question. And it wasn't until I put myself on the other side could I really become familiar of what those skill sets and what those things are that we draw on when we're faced with wanting to give up. So that's what sort of drew me to kind of wanting to do the row. I wanted to do something that, one, had never been done. Two, I wasn't a rower, never sat foot in a rowing boat before. I also had never been out at sea, apart from off the beach of Cornwall. I also was going from being an endurance athlete to suddenly needing to go from a 57 kilo girl to needing to be about 70 odd kilos to put weight on, not be elite and kind of thin and athletic. So I had to eat a lot of McDonald's and crap to put fat mass on, which was interesting in itself. But I had to do loads of things that were out of my ordinary, were out of my known environment. I had to step forward into the unknown. And the biggest quote, as much as I might have rowed the Pacific or gone into an ocean, and that's what I did literally, but we all have our own ocean to cross, every one of us in this room. But you can never cross an ocean until you have the courage of losing sight of the shore, the courage to lose sight of the comfort, of the known, like the areas and the habits of what we know. You've got to step forwards into that unknown and just understand that, yeah, this transition of change, there's loads of things that are going to be risky. But how do we sort of take on that risk? How do we step into that unknown space before we even get there? And what drew me to when we were out in the ocean and all these things that when people were sort of fighting against me and saying, Laura, seriously, you tried to do this after a year, it didn't work out. You've tried again, 2 years, it's failed. Like, give it up. Like, come on, this isn't working out for you. You can't get the team together. You haven't got the funding together. Like, this isn't happening. Now, partly, yes, that's because I'm extremely tenacious and stubborn, thanks to my mum. But that sort of quality and also significantly naive going into the Pacific, I had no idea what we were going to be facing, let's face it. But I had a real openness that I was like, well, you know what, if I've never rowed before, I've never sailed, I need to put mass on, and all of these things that are very unknown. If you can go into the unknown with a blank slate, but with a mindset that is open and is adaptable to take on expert advice, then actually what can we achieve? And that's what drew me to this whole ethos of actually the adaptive mindset. It's so, so powerful. And I've seen it day in, day out with the people that I've worked in Paralympic sport or people that have gone through trauma. And it really sort of started to come home. And so to me, like, as I started to look into this more and more, adaptability is in us. Like, it's ingrained in us. As humans, we've evolved through the years, through our ancestry. We've had to grow and kind of we've had to adapt in order to survive. In our physiology, we adapt. Like when we get vaccines, we adapt in order to fight against those sort of pathogens. We also adapt when we go to altitude. We take processes. We adapt when we go into heat. Like it's in us. So why is it when we're faced with challenges, we don't necessarily draw on adaptability as a natural resource? But we do it when we do like face things by choice. You know, if we're having kids, people adapt to suddenly being sleep deprived. Some people maybe adapt a bit better than others. I'm sure some of you can affiliate with that in this room. But that being said, we do it because we chose to be there. And I kind of wanted to challenge that fact of, well, why wait in order to be faced with something that's adverse? Why wait for that to come to me? So I chose to go and row an ocean, to go forwards to it and see what I learned. But it became apparent because, like, the people that I've worked with in the past, you know, they've adapted through process of adversity. Whether it's like Dave Henson or Jacco von Gass, the two guys on the end, on the right side and the left side, they were blown up, you know, in Afghanistan in war by standing on an IED. Suddenly thrown an absolute curveball that they did not anticipate. Their life completely changed from then on out. That they woke up to not having any legs or not having an arm and having significant life-changing injuries. Now that's happened to other people in the same situation, but the difference between these two people is one person's woken up to say, thank God I'm alive. I want to make the most out of life. I want to go forwards. I want to just glean everything I can do. And if that means I can become a Paralympic athlete, or I'm going to climb Everest, or I'm going to achieve the adaptive Grand Slam. Like, what's changed? What's the difference between these two people to those people that the same things happened to and they wish they didn't survive? They wish they'd given up and that actually they were killed during that accident. And that difference, when I'm as a physio and I see that in different clients and different athletes that I've seen, it fascinates me because if you can untap, then you can change somebody's thought process and their behavior in somebody that wants to give up versus then actually making them believe that they can achieve. That's extremely powerful. And to me, these other two sort of good examples, you know, those that sort of go through breast cancer, we've all got challenges that we face, unfortunately. And unfortunately, the way the world is in medical sort of ways at the moment, and also just the times have changed. Like, we are going to face significant challenges and how we overcome that. But it's the mindset that we face, I think, is really, really crucial. So to touch on kind of, that was my why. Everybody asked me, why did you want to row the Pacific? That's my why. It's not about, for me, it wasn't about getting on the bandwagon of expeditions and doing one thing after the other. Yes, I've always been sporty and done sort of half Ironmans or whatever, but it's been more of a physical health, whereas it was because I wanted to understand what it was that we draw on when we're faced with wanting to give up. And the row for me was so pertinent to that because we weren't going to have a support boat. We didn't have a support boat. We were out there alone. We were completely needed to be self-sufficient. Like, I couldn't rely on somebody else. I had no get-out clause. Like, once we set off from shore, that was it. There was no turning back. I eliminated any element of choice. If we had a boat there, the chances are you're going to want to step on board that as soon as things get a little bit difficult. So don't give yourself a choice. Crack on and deal with it. So for me, like, that's what drove me to do this. It wasn't getting on the bandwagon. So where we went from was, as Luke said, San Francisco, aiming to Cairns. Now, those of you that are the mathematicians in the room, that will say that it should take 6 months roughly to do that. Classically, obviously, it didn't take 6 months. It took 9. So slightly misjudged on the time frame, and partly because of the time of season and those sorts of things. But we did face challenges. You know, 10 days into the start of it, after 4 years of getting to the start line, 10 days in, and we had flooding on the boat and a fire. Not ideal when you're in the middle of the ocean with no support. But obviously, I didn't want to leave any question left unturned. I wanted to prepare for those unknown situations. But we had to make a choice at that point to then turn back into Santa Barbara, which for me at that point was one of my lowest points of the journey, because I felt like we were a pink boat of 4 women that then looked like we'd given up within the first 10 days. The very thing, pride-wise, I did not want to swallow. But I had to, for the sake of my teammates on the journey. And that's a long story, but 2 of us wanted to continue forwards, regardless of what kit we had on board, and 2 of them wanted to turn back. But those 2 that wanted to turn back were my teammates going on from Hawaii and Samoa. So I had to eliminate that risk of them stepping off the boat when we got to Hawaii. So I made that choice to turn back in. And thank God we did, because that turning back in actually was still a step forwards. There was no looking back. We continued on to Hawaii, on to Samoa, and then finished in Cairns 9 months later. But all of this would not have been the success it was if it wasn't for the team. And the environment that we were in was this. Now, it's surprising of what we adapt to, because this was our home, and this became our home, and this was our environment. Now, the thought of me now sleeping in this space and not my big double bed and having a nice clean shower, well, if you asked me by choice to be there, then I'd most probably say no, I'm not going to go back there again. But I didn't give myself a choice, and this is what we were doing, and this is what we became comfortable with. So we were living, sleeping, eating, blogging, doing everything in the size of a small single bed, if that. The size of the boat itself was 29 foot. It was pretty much less than the length of this stage. And that was our environment for the 9 months that we were out at sea for. We rode for 2 hours on, 2 hours off, constantly rotating 24/7, not sleeping for more than 90 minutes maximum at any one time. And so, yeah, that led into a few hallucinations in the middle of the night, as you can imagine. Very poignant ones, and also, not having a Scooby-Doo where we were, what we were doing. But fundamentally, all we had to do is bite-sized piece, not look at that big picture, but chunk it down. It was literally stroke by stroke. It was shift by shift. It was day by day. And by doing that, we slowly got there. That's not to say we didn't have currents that pushed us off. That was not to say that we did not have 5 hurricanes that tail ends and kind of really threw us off course, and we had to batten down the hatches. But we did get there, and this was the environment. But to survive in that environment with 3 other colleagues of mine was an interesting sort of space. You can't run away from arguments on that space. You've got to deal with it. And it's taught me so much. Like, openness, honesty, and how we communicate is so, so powerful. Because we tend to shy away from thinking we're hurting somebody else's feelings. Now, this team, everybody assumes, was friends of mine. Like, I'd put together a team that were my best mates. There's not a chance I'd do it with my best mates. I love them, but there's no way I'd live on a boat like this for 9 months. It's just interesting from how we build the characters and what we put around us. But I wanted to put together a clean slate and start from afresh to make sure that no stone was left unturned, and that we never, ever sort of left a day with kind of things being left unsaid. Because to me, that was not going to be the success of our journey. So these were the girls that sort of achieved it. And for us, kind of how we stayed together and how we were successful, the key goal for us was finishing this journey as a team. It wasn't finishing this journey the fastest. It was not just finishing this journey. It was about finishing it as a team, which we all collectively bought into. And because of that, it meant that we shared collective values. And our values were team spirit, strength, perseverance, integrity, resilience, inspiration, and trust, which we grew heartedly together to sort of build. And we would reflect on that every week. How are we sort of holding each other to account? Are we showing strength? Are we showing perseverance? Are we trusting each other? And if we're not, what are we doing about it to make ourselves better? Constantly reviewing our processes. Now, as you can see, there's kind of more than 4 that are up there. And unfortunately, Izzy, 2 months out, wasn't able to continue for the full journey. She could only do 1 leg. So I brought 2 other girls in, Lizanne and Meg, to join us in Hawaii and then join us in Samoa. So we, again, had another step of change. But we had to just cope with that change, and we had to facilitate it as best as we could, get the girls up to speed to come into the boat that had already been out there, and we'd already sort of formulated our routines, and how could we get Lisanne to feel embedded within that team as quickly as possible. And that was, again, through communication, openness, honesty, the person that's getting off the boat, sharing the difficulties that they faced, enable them to sort of engage and come in, and enabling that sort of quality time together. But that's not to say we did not face our dark times. You know, the dark times being, like I said, yes, your classic of being through storms, being battened down the hatches, being seasick for like the first 10 days and literally losing 2 stone of weight, all of those things. But in all sort of honesty, the hardest times were when we had arguments, like how you got through sort of the darker times of us interacting as a team. And I think kind of for me, like those were the times where I had to adapt the most. Where I really learnt adaptability was when kind of my viewpoint, my lens, was clearly not going to get the best out of somebody else. So I had to understand what their behaviour was, what their kind of vision was, in order to try and adapt the way I approached it to get the best out of them. And that was my biggest learning curve, to sort of how I adapted my approach. And that's kind of what I've taken on to sort of how I work with my athletes now. Because kind of adaptive behaviours that we see in sport and in other worlds that I work in, I'm part of the RNLI, I'm on the shore crew down in, when I'm home in Cornwall. And you know, as much as the RNLI is a phenomenal volunteer service, it's got a process in place that it lays out and it teaches you. But you've still got to adapt to every single shout that we go on. We've got no idea what's going to happen, where they're against the rocks, where, you know, whatever we're going to have to draw on. But that collective awareness of being adaptable and just problem solving in the moment is phenomenal, and it's so powerful when you're from completely different backgrounds. But one of the couple of other stories I've put up there is, I found really powerful in sport is that Bob Bowman, for instance, with Michael Phelps, is a really interesting story of actually now taking forwards kind of, we see the strength in having adaptive behaviours, in adaptability mindset. But actually, how can we teach that? Is that something that we can influence in somebody that doesn't naturally have it? Now, Bob Bowman will talk about quite openly about some of the stuff he did with Michael Phelps, in that if he saw that he'd left his goggles before he went for a comp, he didn't run and give them to him. He told him to, you know, he left him to it. He was like, no, he's got to figure it out for himself. And when I was a coach that I work with now in British sailing, and he will specifically turn up late to certain events, or he would have forgotten something, but he does it on purpose. And he riles the athletes because he wants them to figure it out for themselves, change their own mindset, and they can be as angry as they want with a coach, but fundamentally it helps them to influence their behaviours and how they overcome something, which I think is really valuable in this time when actually what you've all been talking about today is how much do we give the consumers more and more. And obviously, as a consumer, you know, we want things to be easy, but by things becoming so easy, we're also minimizing that sort of adaptability, that kind of autonomous like behavior that we can have to actually overcome things. We're making things so easy that people are actually struggling with just day-to-day life. Unfortunately, mental health is something that's on the uprise. It's massively on. Maybe we're becoming more aware of it, or is it because we're becoming less resilient? Life, society in the Western culture is becoming so easy. We're not having to fight to survive. We're not having to adapt. I don't know the answer to that, but that's a question that I have of how can we? So I kind of, where I'm at in my process of having gone through this is, you know, how can we influence adaptive behaviours? How can I influence my athletes? And I think there's a few ways that I see in that. One is by creating false barriers. So we force people to think in a different way. We force people to sort of challenge. But sometimes that's not enough. People will step back and go, well, it just didn't work. I think there's other ways in the fact that we just don't create choice. We make it quite clean and simple, and people have to crack on with it. Like the panel were talking earlier about, you know, this whole thing with Brexit, and do not talk to me about politics. I'm the last person you want to ask any questions about politics. But with regards to the fact of it is what it is, like, and we're just going to have to adapt because we have to. We've got no decision in what's going to happen. But I think the other thing that I'm starting to see is the art of questioning. And interesting being in the house of Google where we ask questions and we get the answers back. But actually, the art of how we can make people think and challenge our adaptive behaviors or our adaptive thinking, there's a real art in how we question. And there's some fascinating books and literature that's out there all about the art of questioning. And that's something that I'm trying to draw on with my athletes, to get them to think in a different way, to think for themselves, to be autonomous. And basically, you know, I don't want to be telling them stuff all the time. I don't want to be telling them off like a flipping teacher. You know, when somebody goes kite surfing and then they fracture their ankle, and I'm like, well, it's got nothing to do with the sport you're supposed to be doing and you're being paid for. So why did you have to do that choice? Why did you make that choice? I can slate them as much as possible, but that doesn't change their behavior. I need to get them to think in the same way as I would sort of think. But I need to adapt that. And there's a way that I still haven't nailed yet, but I think the art of education and questioning and how we get people to think is really, really powerful. But above and beyond all of that, I think something that we all sort of share is, currently speaking, yes, we are going through a transition of change, and that will be the sort of the way that we are all the way. But fundamentally, we all have our own Pacific to cross. We all have challenges that we're going to face in, whether it's work, whether it's in politics, whether it's in life, whether we get thrown a curveball, unfortunately, that might be from a health perspective. But we all have our own Pacific to cross in any shape or form. And all I can say is I hope we have the courage to just lose sight of that shore and go forwards. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Would you like a water?
Ah, yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Let me pour you a glass of water. You deserve it.
Thank you very much, mate.
After all that. There you go.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you very much. So I'm sure there's lots of questions, but I left the tablet on the screen, on the table, so I've got to figure that out. But you said that you didn't row before.
No.
So how did you decide that rowing across the Pacific Ocean was going to be a good idea?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do something that was completely unknown.
Take a seat.
Yeah, grand. So for me, I was more doing like as a hobby. It was like triathlon stuff. So if it was anything that was running, biking, swimming, I knew that kind of people would expect it of me. I did look into doing Ride Across America or whatever, but it wasn't really gripping me as much because I kind of knew that sport. I wanted to be a blank canvas. I wanted to see what I was going to draw on, what would sort of be a blank canvas of something I'd never done. And then I heard about ocean rowing. Somebody wanted to put a team together to do the Indian at the time. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I love the sea when it's on the coast.
Yeah.
When
your feet are on shore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, slightly different when it's out there. But yeah, and I was like, I've always wanted to learn to row. Never had the opportunity at uni because the physio was a bit intense. So I was like, great. Well, I know GB rowing, so I'll ask the coaches there to teach me to row. Might as well go to the top. I know the GB, sort of the S&C coach, so he can put some weight on me. And yeah, take it from there.
There you go. So you hadn't got any rowing experience, and I know that some of your teammates didn't have any rowing experience. So how did you go about selecting your team? Because it clearly was based on that principle.
No, the team selection was really interesting. In all seriousness, there was about 3 failed attempts, I would say. Girls that have been involved that still to this day were very influential to the process. But because we didn't have the funds and we didn't have the boat quite built yet and things like that, then things got postponed. So year by year, it ended up taking 4 years to get to start line when I thought it was only going to be 1. That's when naivety was bliss. But that being said, the final stage was when I kind of had to stop and go, okay, this is the second time round that's not been effective. How can I select a team? Because one day, and again, it comes back to asking the question, I always knew in my head that one day there was going to be a team of women that would row the Pacific, because it will just happen, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, yeah. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't make it happen. So it then drew me to draw on some experts. So I had to step out and go, okay, I'm clearly seeing through things through my own lens, and I'm not picking the right people, because I'm picking people that I'm getting drawn to, because I feel like I think we've got a similar mindset. And in actual fact, I needed people that were different to me. So I worked with a psychologist and got him to sort of do some psychometric testing. I also brought in some ex-military guys to do some physical testing with us. So initially people applied, then they did psychometric analysis, then we did one-to-one interviews, then we did some testing down at Bisham with strength conditioning and stuff like that. Then I got them into the boat, so they did like a row over to the Isle of Wight. And then we went to, this was all over about 3 months. Then we went to the Brecons. We did a 72-hour sleep depot where I asked the army guys to like blitz us with sleep deprivation, challenge us with decision making, change up the team dynamics, like put each of us in different leadership roles. And I said, I want it all done under cold, wet conditions and make us hungry, take food away from us. So we really did shape a bit of a brutal 3 days. But it was perfect.
Sounds perfect.
And I loved it, yeah. But it was really ideal because it's the best way, because I went into that thinking I knew who my team was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I've just added a few people in here to buffer it. And in actual fact, it was complete opposite. 2 of the girls that were basically struggling towards the back, Nat, one of them, she'll be open to admit, was not naturally a performer as such. Like a couple of the other girls I selected were ex-MDS athletes, so Marathon des Sables, 7 marathons across the desert. And I was like, yeah, they're definitely going to be nails. They'll be the ones that I want in the boat. And in actual fact, they weren't great team players. And it was like Nat, who was Miss Nomadic, lived a life that was a little bit spiritual compared to me. Yeah. But she was the one that was struggling at the back, but kept a sense of humour and totally kept morale up.
Yeah.
And I was like, crap, if she's making me laugh when I'm actually feeling quite uncomfortable, I definitely want her in the boat. I don't care about performance because in actual fact, I can teach anybody to row or I can teach anybody to be physically fit. But what you can't teach people as easily is that personality and that kind of encompassing and that social scene. And that's what I realised was so, so powerful, important for us.
And it was at that stage when you developed the values, the spirit. Could you remind us what spirit, those values again?
Yeah, so kind of, I really wanted something that was like an acronym that we would remember. It's always, you know, we all know in brands and companies, we do it in sport all the bloody time, and it's like values are about, you know, we talk about it and it's stuck up on the wall, but nobody actually knows what they are, and you don't live and breathe it. It's like, but actually, if you can live and breathe it, it can be extremely powerful. But I needed it to be something that I could remember because my memory's not great when it's stuff like that. So I was like, but I also wanted the girls to embody it as well. So we did a session with our psychologist all about kind of values that sang home to all of us. And then kind of through an art of how he did it to sort of get it out of each of us, we came to sort of 5 key ones. And then spirit was pretty much standing out to us to be the one that it was the overarching sort of word. And then we were able to pull it out with our separate values from that.
Did you have to change it at all through the journey in terms of what it meant for you when you had 2 new people join?
No, interestingly, they totally bought into it as well. So that was good. At that point in change, like it definitely was, that was stuck and that was what we lived and breathed by, and they shared that philosophy as well, which was great.
We've talked about machine learning and AI and all those technologies that are important in our space, but what were the technologies and innovations that you were relying upon?
Yeah, interesting. For us, purely on the boat was, you know, your usual kind of GPS, sat-navy type stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were working with Raymarine and had the usual kit, and then we would, so like AIS comms with other boats to sort of check, you know, we didn't have collision risk, the normal comms with a radio, but then we had sat phone with back to good old Tony, who was talking at the end of that one, and the video.
Your rock.
My rock, yeah, he was solid. And he was the one that would send us messages on a daily basis of like, right, this is the weather, this is what's coming in, this is basically the course you need to hold. So that's kind of, you know, we just did what we were told to do.
It's a critical piece of tech.
Yeah. That being said, I mean, we were just talking about it before, a bit like, you know, the data that you guys gather in sport, we're always gathering data, but I just don't think we process it anywhere near as good as you lot are in this room. But, you know, but we're looking at it on a pure performance of a physical performance, obviously VO2 max, heart rate, whatever. And as a physio, I'm always interested in stats from a point of view of injury prevalence and making sure we optimize availability all the time. When I was on the row, we collected research, and I'm writing it up at the moment still, 3 years later, still haven't written up. But yes, saliva samples and our immunity profile and what happened with it and influence. So
Should definitely talk to Anna about data afterwards.
Yeah.
That's her thing. There's a few people asking the inevitable here, which is what did you do for the toilet?
I knew
Basic
that was coming.
technology. Because I've watched the documentary a couple of times and there's no sight of a toilet there.
Oh, but there is. There is, if you just look for it. There's a red bucket, and I don't know if it's on any of my slides. But basically, if you watch the doco and you see a red bucket, that's that's the bucket of choice. And that's as much as you need to know.
Definitely watch the documentary, and I can see Lisa's waving at me in the back, but I'm going to ask one last question. What was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome whilst at sea?
I think really that turning back after 10 days was the biggest hurdle that personally I had to face. Second to that, when we were crossing the equator, it was quite clear that we were massively delayed. We were 90 days on that second leg, which should have been 62. And that meant I was due to be back for British Athletics I was working with at the time, so I was due to get back to be for Rio. And we had a world champs, and I realised then I wasn't going to make it back in time. And I was really gutted because I felt like I was letting that team down, and I felt a bit compromised. So that again was another struggle.
Well, let's end on a high. What was the biggest highlight?
The wildlife is amazing out there.
Is it? Did you see any sharks?
Yeah, loads. We had Fernando and Alonso, and we gave them all names. There's a lot of things out there. Yeah, how you create humour and sort of just normal chat becomes a bit sparse.
What was your favourite? I'm sure it was. Well done. Thank you very much for joining us. I think you'll agree that was absolutely amazing. And do watch the documentary if you can on Netflix, Amazon, and I think on iTunes as well. It's brilliant. Really, really well worth a watch. So thank you, Laura. Really impressive. So we're a little bit over time, but I think we're doing pretty well. We have just a couple of final pieces to announce. This is our competition. You're going to find it right outside. And it's a lowest unique bid wins. And you can also go to nmpi.co/bid. That's that one done. Moving to the next slide. And because that tees me into talking about outside, there's some more food and some more drinks and some networking opportunity to be had out there. So please do join us. If you're able to stay for a little while or for longer, then please do join us. Meet with the speakers, ask them the questions that I wasn't able to get to. They'll be there ready for you to ask them or just mingle. And if you want to stay longer, then we've got a bar downstairs called the Drake and Morgan from 6:30 onwards. So you're welcome to join us there as well. So I think that's some of the housekeeping done. Let me just check. Thank you. Yes, it is. Drinks. So just really to wrap up now, and I've got a few seconds left. Thank you to all of our speakers over here. I think a round of applause collectively for brilliant. You really covered it from end to end, all 5 principal behaviours, whether it's climbing a mountain or rowing an ocean or just running a really good, successful business and marketing campaign. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. Thank you to Google, obviously, for having us in their house. It's a brilliant venue, and thank you so much to Cassia and Alex and the team for having us and helping us to organise this. We couldn't do that without you. It really is a fantastic venue, I think you'll agree. And then finally, thank you to our marketing team, Lisa and Ruthie, somewhere at the back, hiding away, for persevering, for putting up with me for the last few months of organising this and making it all happen. Couldn't have done it without you, so a round of applause for you too. And then finally, thank you to all of you for giving up your afternoon, coming and spending it with us. I hope it was worthwhile. See you at drinks. Thank you.